One second, you feel safe. And then,
The police are on their way.
well, you still do.
The notification ping from my phone cut through the evening silence like a blade. I was sprawled on our leather couch, still in my work clothes from the construction site, watching Elena move around our kitchen with that distracted energy she'd had for weeks. She was humming something I didn't recognize, her blonde hair catching the overhead light as she prepared what she called a quick dinner, another frozen meal heated in our expensive microwave. "Let's spend the evening together." The text was from an unknown number, but something about the directness made my chest tighten. I glanced at Elena, who was now scrolling through her own phone while stirring pasta sauce that smelled like it came from a jar. My fingers hesitated over the keyboard. In our 12 years of marriage, I'd never been the type to entertain random messages from strangers. Elena always joked that I was too loyal for my own good, too trusting, too willing to see the best in people even when they disappointed me. "Actually, I love my wife," I typed back, feeling slightly ridiculous, but wanting to make my position clear. The response came so fast it made me jump. "You don't know about your wife yet?" My blood went cold. Elena was laughing at something on her screen now, completely absorbed, completely unaware that my world was tilting sideways. The stranger's words felt like a punch to the gut, not because they were cruel, but because they carried the weight of certainty. "Who is this?" I typed, my hands suddenly unsteady. "Someone who's tired of watching lies walk through my office like they own the place. Your wife works for me. Elena's boss." My mind raced through what little I knew about her workplace dynamics. Elena worked at Morrison & Associates, a mid-sized marketing firm downtown. She'd been there for 3 years, climbing the corporate ladder with the kind of ambition that both impressed and sometimes worried me. She talked about her colleagues constantly. There was Derek from accounting, who always brought donuts, Sarah from HR, who had terrible taste in men, and Ryan, who headed the creative department and apparently had everyone eating out of his hand. Ryan. Elena mentioned Ryan a lot. "I don't know what game you're playing," I typed back, "but I'm not interested." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, then appeared again. When the message finally came through, it included an attachment that made my stomach drop. It was a photo taken in what looked like the office break room. Elena was there, laughing at something, but she wasn't alone. A tall man with dark hair and an expensive suit had his arm around her waist in a way that was far too familiar, too comfortable. Her hand was resting on his chest, and they were looking at each other like they shared secrets. "This was taken last Thursday," the message continued. "The same Thursday you told me she was working late on the Henderson project. There is no Henderson project." I stared at the photo until my eyes burned. Elena's face in the picture was radiant in a way I hadn't seen directed at me in months. She looked happy, carefree, like a woman who wasn't carrying the weight of a mortgage and a marriage and all the small compromises that came with building a life with someone. "Elena," I called out, my voice sounding strange even to my own ears. She looked up from her phone, eyebrows raised. "Yeah, babe? How was work today?" "Oh, same old stuff. We're swamped with this new client, so I might have to stay late again tomorrow." She said it easily, casually, like she'd practiced the words. My phone buzzed again. "If you want the truth, meet me at Murphy's Diner on 5th Street in an hour. Come alone. I'm not trying to steal your husband. I'm trying to give you information you deserve to have." I looked at Elena again. She'd gone back to her phone, completely absorbed, occasionally smiling at whatever was on her screen. The pasta sauce was starting to bubble over on the stove, but she didn't notice. "I need to run out for a bit," I said, standing up and grabbing my keys. "Now? But dinner's almost ready." "Save me a plate. I won't be long." She shrugged, already turning back to her phone. "Whatever. I'll probably just eat and head to bed early anyway. Big day tomorrow." Another late day, no doubt. The drive to Murphy's Diner felt like the longest 20 minutes of my life. I kept replaying every conversation, every excuse, every time Elena had come home smelling like cologne that wasn't mine. I'd noticed things, of course I had, but I'd explained them away because that's what you do when you love someone. You give them the benefit of the doubt until the doubt becomes impossible to ignore. Murphy's was one of those old-school diners that hadn't changed its decor since 1985. Red vinyl booths, checkered floors, and a waitress named Dolores who'd been working there since before I was born. I spotted Elena's boss immediately. She was sitting in a corner booth, still in her work clothes, looking like she'd rather be anywhere else. Samantha Morrison was probably in her mid-40s, with steel gray hair and the kind of sharp business attire that suggested she didn't have time for nonsense. She looked up when I approached, and her expression was a mixture of sympathy and resignation. "You came," she said, gesturing for me to sit across from her. "I'm here. Now tell me what this is about." She slid a manila folder across the table. "Before I show you what's in there, I want you to know that I've been debating whether to contact you for weeks. This isn't easy for me. Elena is a good employee, and I don't make it a habit to get involved in my staff's personal lives. But I can't watch someone get played for a fool when I have the power to stop it. You seem like a decent man, and you deserve better than what's happening to you." I opened the folder with hands that felt disconnected from my body. Inside were printouts of security camera footage, time-stamped and dated. Elena and the man from the break room photo, Ryan, I realized, in various compromising positions throughout the office, leaving together after hours, his hand on her back as they walked to the parking garage. Standing close in the elevator, her head tilted toward his, like she was sharing secrets. "How long?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "3 months that I know of. Probably longer." Samantha's voice was gentle but firm. "It started around the time we hired Ryan as creative director. Elena volunteered to help him get settled, show him around the city. Professional courtesy," she said. I flipped through more photos. Elena getting into Ryan's car. Elena and Ryan at what looked like a restaurant I'd never been to. Elena wearing a dress I'd never seen before, looking at Ryan like he hung the moon. "Why are you showing me this?" "Because Ryan is married too. Has been for 8 years. His wife Sarah is a lovely woman who brings cookies to our office holiday parties and talks about how lucky she feels to have found such a devoted husband." Samantha's jaw tightened. "I've watched 2 good people get betrayed by people who are supposed to love them, and I'm tired of being a silent witness to it." The diner suddenly felt too small, too hot, too full of the smell of grease and coffee and the weight of other people's conversations. I closed the folder and pushed it back toward her. "Keep it," she said. "You might need it later." "What am I supposed to do with this?" "That's up to you. But whatever you decide, you deserve to make that decision with all the facts." I drove home in a daze, the manila folder sitting on my passenger seat like a bomb waiting to explode. Elena was already in bed when I got back, claiming she had a headache and needed to rest up for another busy day at work. She barely looked at me when I came into the bedroom, just mumbled something about the pasta being in the fridge, and rolled over to face the wall. I sat in our living room until 3 in the morning, staring at the photos and trying to reconcile the woman in them with the woman sleeping upstairs. The Elena in the pictures looked alive, vibrant, like she was living her best life. The Elena who'd been sharing my bed for the past few months had been distant, distracted, going through the motions of our marriage like she was reading from a script. Now I knew why. The next morning, Elena was gone before I woke up. Another early meeting, according to the note she'd left on the kitchen counter. I called in sick to the construction site, something I hadn't done in over 2 years, and spent the morning researching Ryan Morrison. It didn't take long to find him on social media. Ryan Morrison, 34, creative director at Morrison & Associates. Originally from Chicago, moved to our town 8 months ago for the job. Married to Sarah Morrison, a kindergarten teacher who posted pictures of her classroom decorations and their golden retriever, Max. Ryan's profile was full of professional headshots and photos from work events, including several recent ones featuring Elena. In one photo from what looked like a company happy hour, Elena was sitting next to Ryan at a high-top table, both of them laughing at something off camera. Her wedding ring was clearly visible, but her body language screamed availability. Ryan's hand was resting casually on her knee. The comments on the photo made my stomach turn. Co-workers joking about the dynamic duo and how they made such a great team. Someone had even commented, "Get a room," with a string of laughing emojis. Elena had liked the comment. I was still staring at my phone when the doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I could see a man I didn't recognize. Tall, dark-haired, wearing an expensive-looking suit even though it was barely 10 in the morning. "Can I help you?" I asked through the door. "Are you David Chen?" The voice was confident, entitled. "Depends who's asking." "I'm Ryan Morrison. I think we need to talk." My blood pressure spiked. This was him, the man who'd been screwing my wife for 3 months, standing on my front porch like he had every right to be there. I opened the door, but didn't invite him in. "What do you want?" Ryan was even more polished in person than in his photos. Everything about him screamed money and success, from his perfectly styled hair to his Italian leather shoes. He was the kind of man who'd never worked with his hands, never worried about making payroll, never had to choose between fixing the roof and taking his wife on vacation. "Look, I know this is awkward," he said, flashing a smile that probably worked wonders in boardrooms and apparently on married women. "But I think there's been a misunderstanding about Elena and me." A misunderstanding? I kept my voice level, but my hands were clenched into fists. "We're colleagues, friends, that's all. I heard through the grapevine that someone's been spreading rumors about us, and I wanted to clear the air before things get out of hand." The sheer audacity of it took my breath away. He was standing on my porch, looking me in the eye, and lying with the kind of smooth confidence that suggested he'd had plenty of practice. "Friends," I repeated. "Exactly. Elena's been helping me navigate the transition to a new city, new job. She's been incredibly supportive, both professionally and personally. I can see how that might be misinterpreted by people who don't understand the situation." "And what situation is that?" Ryan's smile faltered slightly. "Look, David. Can I call you David? I know change can be threatening. Elena's been growing professionally, expanding her horizons, meeting new people. That doesn't mean she loves you any less. You don't know anything about my wife or our marriage. I know she's an incredible woman who deserves to be appreciated for her talents and ambitions. I know she lights up when she talks about the projects we're working on together. I know she's found a sense of purpose and excitement that she's been missing." Each word was like a knife twist. He was describing a version of Elena I barely recognized, passionate, driven, alive. When had I stopped seeing her that way? When had our conversations become limited to bills and schedules and the mundane details of keeping a household running? "If you're just friends," I said carefully, "then you won't mind if I ask Elena about your friendship tonight." Something flickered in Ryan's eyes. Surprise, maybe, or calculation. "Of course not. But I hope you'll approach the conversation with an open mind. Elena values our working relationship, and I'd hate for office politics to interfere with her career advancement." "Is that a threat?" "It's a reality. Elena has a bright future ahead of her, and I'd hate to see personal jealousy derail her professional opportunities." The bastard was smooth. I had to give him that. He'd managed to position himself as Elena's champion and me as the insecure husband standing in the way of her success. If I hadn't seen the photos, if I didn't know what I knew, I might have actually bought his performance. "Thanks for stopping by," I said, stepping back and starting to close the door. "David, wait." Ryan's polished facade cracked slightly. "I think we got off on the wrong foot here. Why don't we grab a beer sometime, man to man? I'd like to get to know the guy who landed such an amazing woman." "I don't think so." Elena talks about you all the time, you know. How hard you work, how dedicated you are to providing for your family. She really admires that about you." The condescension in his voice was unmistakable. He was painting me as the reliable, boring provider while positioning himself as the exciting alternative. The worst part was that he probably wasn't wrong about Elena's feelings. "Have a good day, Ryan." I closed the door and leaned against it, my heart pounding. Ryan Morrison wasn't just sleeping with my wife. He was manipulating the entire situation to make me look like the villain if I dared to object. He'd probably already coached Elena on how to handle any questions I might ask, probably framed any potential confrontation as evidence of my controlling, jealous nature. My phone buzzed with a text from Elena. "Working through lunch today. Don't wait up for dinner. We're ordering in to finish the Peterson proposal. Love you." I stared at the message, wondering if she was actually working or if ordering in meant room service at whatever hotel she and Ryan were using for their afternoon meetings. The casual, "love you," at the end felt like salt in an open wound. I spent the rest of the day alternating between rage and something that felt like grief. I kept walking through our house, looking at the photos on the walls, the furniture we'd picked out together, the little domestic details that represented 12 years of building a life together. Had any of it ever been real? Or had I been playing house with a woman who was just waiting for something better to come along? By the time Elena got home at 9:30, I'd made my decision. "How was work?" I asked as she kicked off her heels and headed straight for the wine fridge. "Exhausting. The Peterson proposal is turning into a nightmare, but I think we're finally making progress." She poured herself a generous glass of Chardonnay and took a long sip. "How was your day? You look tired." "I had an interesting visitor this morning." Elena paused with the wine glass halfway to her lips. "Oh?" "Ryan Morrison stopped by. Said he wanted to clear up some misunderstandings about your friendship." The color drained from Elena's face, but she recovered quickly. "That was nice of him. What kind of misunderstandings?" "Apparently someone's been spreading rumors about you two." "Rumors?" Elena's voice was carefully neutral, but I could see the tension in her shoulders. "What kind of rumors?" I pulled out my phone and showed her one of the photos Samantha had given me, the one of her and Ryan in the break room, his arm around her waist, both of them looking at each other like they were sharing the world's most intimate secret. Elena stared at the photo for a long moment, and I watched her face cycle through surprise, guilt, and finally, defiance. "Where did you get this? Does it matter?" "Of course it matters. Someone's been spying on me at work, taking pictures without my knowledge. That's a violation of privacy, David. It's creepy." "Is it true?" "Is what true?" "Are you sleeping with Ryan Morrison?" The question hung in the air between us like a live wire. Elena set down her wine glass and crossed her arms, suddenly looking more angry than guilty. "I can't believe you're asking me that. I can't believe I have to. Ryan is my colleague and my friend. Yes, we work closely together. Yes, we've developed a good working relationship. That doesn't mean we're having an affair." "Then explain the photo." "I don't have to explain anything. You're my husband, not my parole officer. If you can't trust me after 12 years of marriage, then we have bigger problems than office gossip." She was good. I had to give her that. She'd managed to flip the script, making me the bad guy for asking reasonable questions about suspicious behavior. It was a masterclass in gaslighting, and if I hadn't had evidence, I might have actually apologized. Instead, I showed her the rest of the photos. Elena's face went white as she flipped through them. Her hands were shaking by the time she reached the last one. A shot of her and Ryan leaving the office together, his hand on the small of her back, both of them heading toward his car. "This isn't what it looks like," she said finally. "What does it look like, Elena?" "It looks like someone with too much time on their hands has been stalking me and twisting innocent interactions into something sordid." "Innocent interactions?" "Yes. Ryan and I are friends. We grab lunch sometimes, we work late together, we talk about our lives. That's what adults do, David. That's what people with careers and ambitions do. And what about people with marriages? Elena's eyes flashed. What about them? Just because I'm married doesn't mean I have to live in isolation. I'm allowed to have friendships. I'm allowed to have a life outside of this house. You're allowed to have friendships. You're not allowed to have affairs. I'm not having an affair. But even as she said it, I could see the lie in her eyes. Elena had always been a terrible liar. It was one of the things I'd loved about her when we first met. Her face was an open book, incapable of deception. Right now, that book was telling a very different story than the words coming out of her mouth. Prove it, I said. What? Prove it. Call Ryan right now, put him on speaker, ask him to tell me directly that you two are just friends. Elena stared at me like I'd suggested she set herself on fire. That's ridiculous. I'm not going to drag Ryan into your paranoid fantasies. Then show me your phone. Absolutely not. Why not? Because I'm a grown woman and I deserve privacy. Because this is insane, David. You're acting like a crazy person. I'm acting like a husband who just found out his wife has been lying to him for months. I haven't been lying to you. Then what do you call this? I gestured to the photos scattered across our kitchen island. What do you call telling me you're working late when you're actually having dinner with another man? What do you call coming home smelling like cologne that isn't mine? What do you call deleting text messages and taking calls in the other room? Elena's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. She hadn't expected me to have been paying such close attention, hadn't realized that her careful deceptions had been noticed and catalogued. You've been spying on me, she said finally. I've been living with you. There's a difference. This is insane. You're insane. I can't have this conversation with you when you're being completely irrational. She grabbed her purse and headed for the door. Where are you going? Somewhere I can think clearly. Somewhere I don't have to defend my every action to someone who's supposed to trust me. Elena, wait! But she was already gone, the front door slamming behind her with enough force to rattle the windows. I stood alone in our kitchen, surrounded by the evidence of her betrayal, listening to the sound of her car pulling out of our driveway. My phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. She's at the Marriott downtown, room 412. I'm sorry. I stared at the message for a long time, wondering if I was brave enough to drive downtown and see for myself what my marriage had become. In the end, I decided I didn't need to. I already knew everything I needed to know. Elena didn't come home that night, or the next morning. By noon on Friday, I'd called her office 3 times, only to be told that she'd taken a personal day. Her phone went straight to voicemail, and the one text I'd sent asking if she was safe had gone unanswered. I was sitting in our living room, staring at the wall and wondering what you're supposed to do when your entire life implodes, when the doorbell rang again. This time it was Sarah Morrison, Ryan's wife. I recognized her immediately from her social media photos, though she looked smaller in person, more fragile. She was probably in her early 30s, with the kind of wholesome prettiness that suggested she'd been homecoming queen in a small town somewhere. Her eyes were red-rimmed, and she was clutching a tissue in her hand. "Are you David Chen?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Yes." "I'm Sarah Morrison, Ryan's wife. I think we need to talk." I invited her in and made coffee while she sat at our kitchen table, looking around our house with the kind of careful attention that suggested she was comparing it to her own. When I set a mug in front of her, she wrapped her hands around it like she was trying to absorb its warmth. "How much do you know?" she asked. "Enough. You?" I found hotel receipts in his jacket pocket. Always the same hotel, always the same day of the week. When I confronted him about it, he said they were business expenses that hadn't been reimbursed yet. Sarah's laugh was bitter. I actually believed him for about 2 weeks. "What changed your mind?" I called the hotel, asked to speak to someone about the corporate rate for Morrison and Associates. They told me the rooms weren't being billed to the company. They were being paid for with a personal credit card. Ryan's personal credit card. I sat down across from her, feeling a strange kinship with this woman I'd never met. We were both casualties of the same war, both collateral damage in our spouses' quest for excitement and passion and whatever else they thought they were missing at home. "How long have you known?" I asked. 2 weeks? You? 2 days. Sarah nodded like this made perfect sense. Ryan's been different for months, happier, more energetic, like he had some secret that was making him feel good about himself. He started working out again, bought new clothes, changed his cologne, all the classic signs that I was too stupid to recognize. "You're not stupid, you're trusting. There's a difference." "Is there?" "Because right now it feels like the same thing." Sarah took a sip of her coffee and made a face. "Sorry, I don't mean to take this out on you. You're dealing with the same thing I am." "Have you confronted him?" "Not yet. I keep thinking I should have more evidence first, like I need to build a case before I'm allowed to be angry about my husband cheating on me." She laughed again, but there was no humor in it. "What about you?" I told her about the photos, about Ryan's visit to my house, about Elena's reaction when I'd confronted her. Sarah listened without interruption, occasionally nodding or wincing at particularly painful details. "She's at the Marriott," I said finally. "Has been since Wednesday night." "With Ryan?" "I assume so." Sarah was quiet for a long moment, staring into her coffee mug like it might contain answers to questions she didn't know how to ask. "I keep thinking about all the times he came home late," she said finally. "All the work dinners and client meetings and business trips that seemed to multiply once he started this job. I made excuses for him, told myself he was just trying to establish himself in a new position. I was proud of him for working so hard. Elena's been doing the same thing, working late, weekend projects, client emergencies that always seem to happen at the most convenient times. Do you think they planned this? Like, do you think they saw us as obstacles to overcome? Or were we just collateral damage?" It was a good question, and one I'd been wrestling with since Wednesday night. Had Elena set out to have an affair, or had she just fallen into one? Did it matter? "I think they told themselves whatever they needed to tell themselves to justify what they were doing," I said. "People are good at that, making their worst impulses feel like destiny." Sarah nodded. "Ryan's always been charming. It's one of the things I fell in love with, the way he could make anyone feel like the most interesting person in the room. I just never thought he'd use that charm on someone else's wife." "What are you going to do?" "I don't know. Leave him, I guess. Start over. You?" "Same, probably." We sat in comfortable silence for a while, two strangers united by betrayal and the strange intimacy that comes from sharing the worst day of your life with someone who understands exactly how it feels. "There's something else," Sarah said eventually. "Something I think you should know." "What?" "Ryan's been talking about Elena at home, not in a way that made me suspicious, just casual mentions of this brilliant colleague who was helping him navigate office politics and client relationships. He said she was wasted in her current position, that she had the kind of strategic mind that could take her anywhere she wanted to go. He said that multiple times. He was always going on about how lucky the company was to have her, how her husband should be proud to be married to such an accomplished woman. Sarah's voice turned bitter. I thought he was just being a good boss, recognizing talent. Now I realize he was grooming me to accept their relationship. The manipulation was breathtaking. Ryan had been conditioning his own wife to view Elena as special, exceptional, worthy of extra attention and admiration. When Sarah inevitably discovered the affair, she'd already been primed to see Elena as someone deserving of Ryan's interest. "He's good at this," I said. "Too good. Which makes me wonder how many other colleagues he's mentored over the years." My phone buzzed with a text message. "Elena, finally." Staying at Mom's for a few days while we both cool down. We need space to think about what we want. I showed the message to Sarah, who read it with the kind of clinical interest of someone analyzing evidence. "She's not at her mother's," Sarah said. "How do you know?" "Because Ryan told me he was staying at the Marriott for a few days to focus on a big project without distractions at home. He said the company was paying for it as part of their commitment to work-life balance." So Elena was lying even now, even after being confronted with photographic evidence of her affair. She was still trying to control the narrative, still trying to maintain plausible deniability while she figured out her next move. I texted back, "Take all the time you need." Sarah watched me type and nodded approvingly. "Good. Don't make it easy for her." "What do you mean?" "I mean, don't chase her, don't beg her to come home, don't give her the satisfaction of knowing she's destroyed you. Make her live with her choices without the comfort of knowing you'll be waiting whenever she decides she's done playing house with my husband." There was steel in Sarah's voice that hadn't been there when she'd first arrived. The fragile, betrayed wife was transforming into something harder, more determined. "You sound like you've given this some thought," I said. "I've had 2 weeks to think about nothing else. 2 weeks to imagine every possible conversation, every possible outcome, every possible way this could play out." She finished her coffee and stood up. "I should go. But David, don't let them make you the villain in this story. They're the ones who broke their vows. They're the ones who lied and cheated and destroyed 2 marriages for the sake of some midlife crisis fantasy. Don't let them rewrite history to make themselves feel better about what they've done." After Sarah left, I spent the afternoon doing something I hadn't done in years. I called in sick to work for the 2nd day in a row and just sat with my thoughts. No TV, no music, no distractions, just me and the wreckage of my marriage and the growing realization that the woman I'd loved for 12 years had been a stranger for longer than I'd wanted to admit. The house felt different without Elena in it. Bigger, somehow, but also more mine. I noticed things I'd stopped seeing, the way the afternoon light hit the hardwood floors, the sound of our neighbor's dog barking in the backyard, the particular silence that comes with being truly alone for the first time in over a decade. My phone rang around 6. Elena's mother. "David, honey, is everything okay? Elena called and said she's staying with me, but she's not here. I'm worried something's happened." Even Elena's mother was getting lied to. The web of deception was so complete, so thorough, that Elena had involved her own family in covering her tracks. "We had a fight," I said, which was technically true. "She needed some space to think things through." "What kind of fight? You two never fight." That was true. In 12 years of marriage, Elena and I had rarely raised our voices at each other. We'd been proud of our communication skills, our ability to work through disagreements like mature adults. Now I wondered if our lack of conflict had been a sign of compatibility or just evidence that we'd stopped caring enough to fight for what we wanted. "It's complicated, Mrs. Patterson, but don't worry. Elena's safe. She's just figuring some things out." "Are you sure?" Because she sounded strange on the phone. Upset, but also, I don't know how to describe it. Excited, maybe? Like she was nervous about something, but also looking forward to it. Excited. That was the word that had been missing from my vocabulary when it came to Elena. When was the last time I'd seen her excited about anything related to our life together? When was the last time she'd looked at me the way she'd been looking at Ryan in those photos? "I'm sure she's fine," I told Mrs. Patterson. "I'll have her call you when she's ready to talk." After I hung up, I poured myself a beer and stood in our backyard, looking at the garden Elena had planted 3 springs ago and then gradually lost interest in maintaining. The roses were overgrown, the vegetable patch was full of weeds, and the decorative fountain she'd insisted we needed had been dry for months. It occurred to me that our marriage had followed the same trajectory as Elena's garden: initial enthusiasm, gradual neglect, and finally, abandonment in favor of something that seemed more promising. My phone buzzed with another text, this one from an unknown number. This is Samantha Morrison. Are you free for lunch tomorrow? I have more information you might find useful. I stared at the message for a long time before responding. What kind of information? The kind that might help you understand how deep this goes. 12:30 at Murphy's? I'll be there. As I went back inside to heat up leftover pizza and contemplate the strange turn my life had taken, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was still only seeing the tip of the iceberg. Elena's affair with Ryan was just the beginning of a story I didn't fully understand yet. But I was about to. Samantha Morrison was already waiting when I arrived at Murphy's the next day, sitting in the same corner booth where she'd first shown me the photos that had destroyed my marriage. She looked tired, like she hadn't been sleeping well, and there was a manila folder on the table in front of her that was considerably thicker than the one she'd given me earlier in the week. "Thank you for coming," she said, as I slid into the seat across from her. "Your message said you had more information." "I do. But first I want you to know that what I'm about to show you goes beyond Elena and Ryan. This situation is more complicated than either of us realized." She opened the folder and pulled out a series of documents, emails, text message screenshots, financial records, and what looked like surveillance photos taken from multiple angles and locations. "I've been doing some digging since our last conversation," Samantha continued. "Elena's affair with Ryan isn't just about two people who got carried away by attraction and opportunity. It's part of a larger pattern of behavior that involves deliberate deception, financial manipulation, and what I can only describe as a coordinated effort to destroy your marriage." I felt my stomach drop. "What do you mean?" "I mean, Elena didn't fall into this affair accidentally. She planned it, orchestrated it, and executed it with the kind of strategic thinking that would be impressive if it weren't so morally bankrupt." Samantha spread out a series of emails between Elena and Ryan, dating back to his first day at the company. The early messages were professional, discussing projects and deadlines and office logistics. But there was an undertone of flirtation that became more obvious as the correspondence progressed. "Look at the timeline," Samantha said, pointing to the dates. Ryan started work on February 15th. By February 22nd, Elena was volunteering to help him find an apartment. By March 1st, she was offering to show him around the city's restaurant scene. By March 15th, they were having drinks after work to discuss his transition to the new role. "That doesn't necessarily mean anything," I said, though even as I spoke, I could see the pattern she was describing. "Keep reading." The emails from mid-March painted a different picture. Elena wasn't just being friendly to a new colleague. She was actively pursuing him, creating opportunities for them to spend time together, positioning herself as indispensable to his success at the company. "Elena has never been the type to go out of her way for coworkers," I said, recognizing the truth even as it hurt to acknowledge it. "Exactly. But with Ryan, she made an exception. And Ryan, to his credit or discredit depending on how you look at it, was smart enough to recognize what was happening and play along." Samantha showed me Ryan's responses to Elena's overtures. He was careful, professional, never crossing obvious lines in writing, but always accepting her invitations, always expressing gratitude for her help, always leaving the door open for more personal interactions. They were both being very careful about creating a paper trail, Samantha observed, but they weren't careful enough. She pulled out a series of credit card statements, Elena's personal account, which I'd never seen before. "How did you get these?" Elena listed me as a reference when she applied for this card 6 months ago. The credit card company has been sending me updates on her account status as part of their reference verification process. Samantha's smile was grim. Elena apparently forgot about that detail. The statements told a story I didn't want to believe. Elena had been using the card to pay for hotel rooms, expensive dinners, lingerie purchases from stores I'd never heard of, and spa treatments that she'd never mentioned to me. The spending had started in March and escalated dramatically over the past 2 months. She's been living a double life, I said, staring at charges for restaurants where we'd never eaten together, hotels in our own city where she'd apparently been meeting Ryan for afternoon trysts. It gets worse. Samantha showed me bank statements from Elena's personal checking account, another account I'd known nothing about. She'd been systematically moving money out of our joint savings account and into her personal account, small amounts at first, but increasingly larger transfers over the past few months. She's been planning to leave you, Samantha said gently. The financial evidence suggests she's been preparing for a divorce for at least 4 months, possibly longer. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. Elena hadn't just been having an affair, she'd been systematically dismantling our marriage while pretending everything was normal. Every morning when she'd kissed me goodbye, every evening when she'd asked about my day, every night when she'd gone through the motions of intimacy, she'd been planning her exit strategy. There's more, Samantha said, though I wasn't sure I could handle any more revelations. She pulled out a series of text messages between Elena and someone named Jessica, discussing the plan and how Elena needed to be patient and strategic about timing her departure. Who's Jessica? Elena's divorce attorney. She's been consulting with her since February, before Ryan even started working at our company. The timeline was devastating. Elena had been planning to divorce me before she'd even met Ryan. Her affair wasn't the cause of our marriage's breakdown. It was just a convenient excuse, a way to make herself feel justified in leaving. Why are you showing me all this? I asked. Because you deserve to know the truth, and because Elena's been telling people at work that you're controlling, that you've been holding her back professionally, that she's been afraid to leave because you've threatened her financially. Samantha's voice was sharp with anger. She's been painting herself as the victim of an abusive marriage, which makes her affair with Ryan look like a brave act of self-liberation. That's not true. I know it's not true. I've seen the way you talk about Elena, the way your face lights up when you mention her accomplishments. You're proud of your wife, supportive of her career, completely devoted to your marriage. But Elena's been rewriting your relationship history to make herself feel better about what she's doing. I thought about all the times over the past few months when Elena had seemed distant, distracted, like she was carrying some burden I couldn't help her with. Now I realized she had been carrying a burden, the weight of living a lie, of pretending to love a man she was actively planning to leave. What am I supposed to do with all this? That's up to you, but if I were in your position, I'd make sure Elena doesn't get to control the narrative about why your marriage ended. She's been very careful to position herself as the innocent party, but the evidence suggests otherwise. Samantha closed the folder and slid it across the table to me. Keep this. You're going to need it for the divorce proceedings. How do you know there will be divorce proceedings? Because Elena's already filed the paperwork. The court documents are public record as of yesterday morning. The hits just kept coming. Elena had filed for divorce without telling me, had been planning to serve me with papers while I was still trying to save our marriage. The woman I'd loved for 12 years had been 3 steps ahead of me the entire time, playing chess while I was still trying to figure out the rules of the game. I'm sorry, David. I know this isn't easy to hear. Why are you helping me? You barely know me. Samantha was quiet for a moment, staring out the diner window at the parking lot where normal people were going about their normal Saturday afternoon routines, unaware that my entire world was collapsing inside Murphy's corner booth. Because I've been where you are, she said finally. My husband left me for his secretary 15 years ago. Told me it was because we'd grown apart, because he needed someone who understood his professional ambitions, because I'd become too comfortable and complacent. I believed him for years, thought I'd failed as a wife, that I'd somehow driven him away. What changed your mind? I found out later that he'd been planning to leave me for over a year before he met the secretary. The affair was just convenient timing. It gave him a reason to feel good about abandoning his family. He got to be the romantic hero in his own story, instead of just another middle-aged man who got bored with his responsibilities. Samantha's story sounded painfully familiar. Elena had found her own romantic narrative, her own justification for blowing up our life together. Ryan wasn't just her lover, he was her excuse, her get-out-of-jail-free card, her proof that she deserved better than the life we'd built together. "I don't want you to spend the next 15 years wondering what you did wrong," Samantha continued. "You didn't do anything wrong. Elena made choices, and those choices have consequences. But they're not your fault." I left Murphy's with the folder tucked under my arm and a strange sense of clarity settling over me. The past week had been a nightmare of confusion and self-doubt, of wondering where I'd gone wrong and how I could fix things. Now I knew there was nothing to fix. Elena had been planning her exit for months, and my only choice was how to handle the aftermath. When I got home, there was a process server waiting in my driveway with divorce papers. Elena had timed it perfectly. She'd made sure I'd be served while she was safely ensconced at the Marriott with Ryan, avoiding any messy emotional confrontations. I signed for the papers and read through them in my living room, surrounded by the detritus of our shared life. Elena was asking for half of everything: the house, our savings, my retirement accounts, even half the value of the construction business I'd built from nothing over the past 8 years. She was also asking for alimony, claiming that she'd sacrificed her career advancement to support my business and now needed financial support while she rebuilt her professional life. It was a masterpiece of revisionist history. Elena had never sacrificed anything for my business, had actually benefited significantly from the financial stability it provided, and was currently making more money than she'd ever made in her life. But she was counting on my ignorance, on the possibility that I wouldn't have access to the evidence that contradicted her claims. She'd underestimated me, just like she'd underestimated my capacity to discover her affair. I spent the rest of the weekend organizing the evidence Samantha had given me and preparing for what I now realized would be a war, not a divorce. Elena had been planning her campaign for months, but she'd made one crucial mistake. She'd assumed I'd go down without a fight. She was about to learn otherwise. Monday morning, I did something I hadn't done in 12 years of marriage. I hired a private investigator. His name was Marcus Webb, a former police detective who specialized in infidelity cases, and he came highly recommended by Tom Bradley, the divorce attorney I'd retained over the weekend. "Your wife's been sloppy," Marcus said, after reviewing the evidence Samantha had provided. "She's left a trail a mile wide, and she's been operating under the assumption that you're too trusting to follow it. What can you find that I don't already have? Financial records going back further than 6 months, communication records between her and the divorce attorney, evidence of asset hiding if she's been moving money around, and most importantly, documentation of her current living situation that contradicts the claims she's making in her divorce filing." Elena's divorce petition painted a picture of a woman who'd been financially dependent on her controlling husband and was now struggling to establish her independence. The reality, as Marcus discovered over the next week, was significantly different. Elena had been planning her departure for over a year, had been systematically moving money into accounts I didn't know about, and was currently living in a luxury hotel suite that cost more per night than most people's mortgage payments. She'd also been using company resources, including Ryan's corporate credit card, to fund her lifestyle during the transition. "This is fraud," Tom Bradley said when Marcus presented his findings. "She's been systematically stealing from your joint accounts while claiming poverty in her divorce filing, and using corporate resources for personal expenses could get both her and Ryan fired. What's our next move? We file a counterpetition that tells the real story. We demand full financial disclosure. We request an immediate freeze on all joint assets to prevent further transfers. And we make it clear that we have evidence of adultery, fraud, and perjury that we're prepared to use if necessary." The counterpetition was filed on a Thursday. By Friday afternoon, Elena's attorney had called Tom 3 times requesting an emergency meeting. "She's panicking," Tom explained. "Elena thought she could control the narrative, but now she realizes you have evidence that contradicts everything she's claimed. She's looking for a way to minimize the damage." "What kind of damage?" criminal charges for the financial fraud, professional consequences for misusing company resources, public humiliation when the evidence of her affair becomes part of the court record. Elena's been living in a fantasy world where she gets to leave her marriage without consequences. Reality is setting in. The emergency meeting was scheduled for the following Monday. Elena would be there with her attorney, and I would finally have the chance to confront her with everything I'd learned. I spent the weekend in a strange state of anticipation, mixed with grief. Part of me was looking forward to seeing Elena's reaction when she realized how thoroughly her deception had been exposed. But part of me was mourning the woman I'd thought I'd married, the relationship I'd believed we'd had, the future I'd thought we were building together. Sarah Morrison called on Sunday evening. She'd filed for divorce from Ryan and moved back to her parents' house in Ohio. "How are you holding up?" she asked. "Better than I expected. You?" "Same. It's amazing how much clearer everything becomes once you stop trying to save something that's already dead." "Have you talked to Ryan?" "Once. He called to explain his side of the story, to tell me how sorry he was, how he'd never meant for things to go this far. He wanted me to understand that what he and Elena had was special, that it wasn't just some sordid affair." "What did you tell him?" "I told him that I didn't care if he thought he was Romeo and Juliet or just two people who couldn't keep their pants on. He'd destroyed our marriage for someone else's wife, and now he could live with the consequences." "How did he take that?" "Not well. He's been calling and texting, trying to get me to agree to counseling, to give him another chance. He seems to think this is all some temporary insanity that we can work through if we just communicate better." "Is Elena doing the same thing with you?" "No. Elena's been radio silent since she got served with the counter petition. I think she's finally starting to understand that this isn't going to go the way she planned." Monday morning arrived with the kind of crisp October weather that had always been Elena's favorite. She used to say that fall was the season of new beginnings, when everything got a chance to start fresh. The irony wasn't lost on me as I walked into Tom Bradley's law office for what would probably be the last conversation Elena and I would ever have. She was already there when I arrived, sitting next to her attorney at a polished conference table, looking smaller and more fragile than I'd ever seen her. She'd lost weight over the past 2 weeks, and there were dark circles under her eyes that suggested she hadn't been sleeping well. When she looked up and saw me, her face went through a series of expressions: guilt, defiance, fear, and finally, resignation. "Hello, David," she said quietly. "Elena." Her attorney, a sharp-dressed woman named Patricia Holmes, got straight to business. "My client is prepared to discuss a revised settlement agreement that takes into account the concerns raised in your counter-petition." "What kind of revisions?" Tom asked. "Elena is willing to forgo her request for alimony in exchange for a 50-50 split of marital assets and a commitment that the evidence of her personal relationships will remain confidential." "That's not going to work," Tom replied. "Our position is that Elena has forfeited her right to marital assets through fraud and adultery. We're prepared to seek a settlement that reflects the financial damage her deception has caused." Elena spoke up for the first time. "David, please, can we talk about this reasonably? We don't have to destroy each other." "You already destroyed us, Elena. I'm just dealing with the aftermath. I know you're angry, and you have every right to be. But we had 12 good years together. That has to count for something." "Did we? Because the evidence suggests you've been planning to leave me for over a year. So maybe we had 11 good years, or 10, or maybe I was the only one who thought they were good at all." Elena's composure cracked slightly. "That's not fair. I did love you, David. I still do, in my way. But we grew apart. We wanted different things. We became different people. When did you decide I wasn't enough anymore?" "It wasn't like that. It wasn't about you not being enough. It was about me needing something different, something that made me feel alive again." "And Ryan makes you feel alive?" Elena glanced at her attorney, who nodded slightly. "Ryan understands my ambitions. He sees my potential. He makes me feel like I can be more than just someone's wife. You were never just someone's wife. You were my partner, my equal, the person I built a life with. But apparently that wasn't enough. It wasn't enough for me, Elena said, and there was a note of defiance in her voice that I recognized from our confrontation 2 weeks earlier. I needed more than a comfortable suburban life with someone who was content to stay exactly where he was forever. So you decided to blow up our marriage and steal our money to fund your midlife crisis? I didn't steal anything. I moved money from joint accounts into personal accounts. That's not illegal. It is when you do it while filing a divorce petition claiming you have no assets, Tom interjected. And it's definitely illegal when you use corporate credit cards for personal expenses. Elena's face went white. She hadn't known we'd discovered the corporate card usage. That was a mistake, Patricia Holmes said quickly. My client was under emotional distress and made some poor financial decisions. She's prepared to make restitution. What about the lies in her divorce petition? Tom asked. The claims about being financially dependent, about being afraid to leave due to threats, about sacrificing her career for her husband's business? Are those also mistakes made under emotional distress? Elena looked like she wanted to disappear into her chair. She'd been caught in a web of lies so complex that she couldn't untangle herself without admitting to perjury. My client is prepared to file an amended petition that corrects any inaccuracies, Patricia said. Your client committed fraud, Tom replied. She systematically deceived her husband about her intentions, her finances, and her relationships while planning to take him for everything he was worth. That's not a mistake. That's a criminal enterprise. David, Elena said, her voice barely above a whisper. Please don't do this. I know I hurt you. I know I made mistakes. But don't destroy my life over this. I'm not destroying your life, Elena. You did that yourself. I'm just making sure you don't destroy mine in the process. What do you want? I want you to admit what you did. I want you to acknowledge that you planned this for months, that you lied to me every day while you were planning to leave, that you stole money from our joint accounts to fund your affair. I want you to take responsibility for your choices instead of trying to make me the villain. Elena was crying now, mascara running down her cheeks in dark streaks. I can't do that. If I admit to fraud, I could lose my job, face criminal charges. You're asking me to destroy my future. You should have thought about that before you decided to destroy our marriage. The meeting ended with no resolution. Elena's attorney requested time to consult with her client about their options, which Tom interpreted as a sign that they were preparing to capitulate to our demands. She's cornered, he explained as we walked to the parking garage. Elena thought she could have her cake and eat it too. Leave her marriage, take half your assets, and start fresh with her new boyfriend. But she got greedy, left too much evidence, and now she's facing consequences she never anticipated. What happens next? She'll probably agree to a settlement that gives her significantly less than she originally demanded in exchange for us not pursuing criminal charges. She'll walk away with enough money to start over, but not enough to live the lifestyle she was planning. And Ryan? That depends on whether his company decides to fire him for misusing corporate resources, but that's not your problem anymore. As I drove home, I felt something I hadn't experienced in weeks: relief. The woman I'd loved for 12 years had turned out to be someone I didn't recognize, but at least now I knew who I was dealing with. Elena had made her choices, and now she would have to live with the consequences. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt like I might actually survive it. 2 days later, Elena agreed to a settlement that gave her 30% of our marital assets and no alimony. She also agreed to repay the money she'd transferred from our joint accounts and to resign from Morrison & Associates to avoid criminal charges for misusing company resources. Ryan was fired the same day Elena resigned. According to Samantha Morrison, He'd been escorted out of the building by security after it was discovered that he'd been using his corporate card to pay for hotel rooms and dinners that had nothing to do with business. Sarah Morrison sent me a text that evening. Heard about Ryan getting fired. Karma's a beautiful thing, isn't it? Elena moved out of the Marriott and into a small apartment across town. She and Ryan were apparently still together, though their relationship had lost some of its romantic luster now that it had cost them both their careers and most of their financial security. I kept the house, the business, and most of our savings. More importantly, I kept my self-respect and my sense of reality. Elena had tried to gaslight me into believing I was the problem in our marriage, but the evidence had told a different story. 3 months later, I ran into Elena at the grocery store. She looked tired, older, like the weight of her choices had settled into her bones. She was alone, pushing a cart full of generic brands and discount items, a far cry from the luxury lifestyle she'd been living at the Marriott. "Hello, David," she said quietly. "Elena. How are you?" "Better. You?" She shrugged. "Getting by. Ryan and I are figuring things out. I heard he's working at a marketing firm in the suburbs now. It's a step down from Morrison and Associates, but it's a job." She paused, looking like she wanted to say something else. "David, I want you to know that I'm sorry. Not just for how things ended, but for how I handled everything. You deserved better." "Yes, I did. I know you probably won't believe this, but I never meant to hurt you the way I did. I felt trapped, like I was disappearing into our life together. I needed to feel like myself again. You could have talked to me about that instead of having an affair and planning to divorce me behind my back. I know. I was a coward. I took the easy way out, and it ended up being the hardest thing I've ever done. I hope it was worth it." Elena's smile was sad, resigned. "It wasn't, but I have to live with my choices now." "We both do." I left her standing in the cereal aisle and finished my shopping. As I loaded groceries into my truck, I realized that I felt genuinely sorry for Elena, not because she'd lost me, but because she'd lost herself. The woman I'd married had been capable of better choices, better judgment, better character. The woman she'd become in pursuit of excitement and passion and whatever else she thought she was missing had destroyed everything good in her life. But that wasn't my problem anymore. 6 months after our divorce was finalized, I started dating again. Nothing serious at first. Just coffee dates and casual dinners with women who seemed interested in building something real, rather than escaping from something else. It felt strange at first, being single again after 12 years, but also liberating in ways I hadn't expected. I kept the business, expanded it, hired more employees. Work became a source of pride and accomplishment, rather than just a means to support a lifestyle Elena had never really appreciated. I bought a boat, took up fishing again, reconnected with friends I'd lost touch with during my marriage. Elena and Ryan lasted about 8 months after our divorce was finalized. According to mutual acquaintances, their relationship fell apart once the excitement of forbidden love gave way to the reality of building a life together on significantly reduced incomes and damaged reputations. Ryan moved back to Chicago. Elena started dating her yoga instructor. I heard these updates with the detached interest of someone following a soap opera, mildly curious about the plot developments, but not emotionally invested in the outcome. Elena had become a character in someone else's story, not a central figure in mine. 2 years after our divorce, I married Sarah Morrison. We'd stayed in touch after our respective divorces, bonding over our shared experience of betrayal and recovery. What started as mutual support evolved into friendship, then romance, then love. Sarah understood what I'd been through, because she'd been through it herself. She knew the value of loyalty, honesty, and commitment because she'd experienced the devastation that comes when those things are absent. Our wedding was small, simple, attended by people who'd supported us through the worst period of our lives. Samantha Morrison, who'd become a close friend to both of us, gave a toast about second chances and the wisdom that comes from surviving betrayal. David and Sarah know something that a lot of couples don't, she said, raising her glass. They know that love isn't just a feeling, it's a choice you make every day. They've both seen what happens when people stop making that choice, and they've chosen differently. Elena sent a card after our wedding, genuine happiness for Sarah and me, regret for not appreciating my love. Sarah tossed it. Her regret doesn't change us. She was right. Elena's betrayal cleared ruins for something stronger. 5 years later, Sarah and I lived lakeside with daughter Emma, kind-hearted,